It's been brought to my attention that when I recently made a couple videos about Project 2025, I was just wasting my time. The former president, I've been told, doesn't actually know anything about Project 2025. And in fact, Trump himself is a policy savant, and it's really his Agenda 47 we should be looking at. So today I'm just going to pretend Project 2025 doesn't exist, and I'm going to walk you through the key pieces of Agenda 47 that touch on cities and transportation. And it's full of all kinds of sober, measured, completely sane policy language around all kinds of urbanism-related stuff, and it's coming up next. This is CityNerd, weekly content on cities and transportation. Viewer-suggested topics always welcome, and yeah, against my better judgment, I decided to take all these comments about Agenda 47 being Trump's real policy platform at face value. And I'm just going to admit right up front that the whole conceit behind this video is completely ridiculous. Project 2025's mandate for leadership, the conservative promise, may be full of loathsome ideas, but it's an 887-page policy document that's written by people who I admit can at least write coherently, as much as I disagree with them. Agenda 47, on the other hand, as far as I can tell, is just a series of short videos of Trump standing awkwardly in front of a couple of American flags and reading some pre-written rants and grievances off a teleprompter. You'll see what I mean in a second. Now, luckily, there are transcripts for each of these videos, so I didn't have to literally listen to this guy talk for hours on end in order to find out what he has to say. Fair warning though, the text reads exactly the way Trump sounds, which is kind of amazing in itself. But for this video, I'm gonna do you the favor of delivering it in my own voice, which is an extremely normal American accent, and don't let anyone tell you different. Okay, so I found a grand total of 8 entries on the Agenda 47 website that are at least tangentially related to cities and transportation, and as I go through these and talk about them, I'll introduce them with the agenda items' actual names, which are amazing. The first one is Rescuing America's Auto Industry from Joe Biden's Disastrous Job-Killing Policies. Like, this guy's whole strategy was obviously built around running against President Biden, and it's been a couple months since the Democrats made this switch, and he's shown no ability to recalibrate whatsoever, which is exactly the kind of character attribute you want in the leader of the free world. A lot of these are just rants with no policy content at all. President Biden is on a Green New Deal crusade, and he's engaged in an all-out attack on American-made pickup trucks, SUVs, and other extremely cool automobiles. And if his assault is not stopped, American auto production will be totally dead, all caps. So he's gonna terminate these atrocities on day one. You know what though? The language on that one wasn't quite unhinged enough for the former president, so he followed up with this banger. President Trump's message to American auto workers, where he repeats a lot of the same stuff, but really aims the messaging at rank-and-file auto workers in swing states. I'm just gonna read some of this verbatim. What's happening to our auto workers is an absolute disgrace and an outrage beyond belief. Auto workers are getting totally ripped off by crooked Joe Biden and also their horrendous leadership, meaning the unions, I assume, because these people are allowing our country to do these electric vehicles that very few people want. And it's a mandate, so you'll ultimately be forced to drive in a car that goes for an hour and then you have to have it recharged. I hope you don't want to go very far away. Like, I'm not a huge EV booster, but this guy's information on the state of the industry and lithium-ion battery life is from like 20 years ago. Anyway, back to the transcript, because the former president has some 100% completely rock-solid advice for union auto workers. You should not pay your dues because they're selling you to hell. You're going to be going to hell. You're not going to have any jobs. Those cars are going to be made in China. Every one of them. You can forget it, Michigan. You can forget it, South Carolina. You can forget it, everybody. All those cars are going to be made in China. You know, I sometimes wonder if all this stuff is made to sound purposefully ridiculous, so we all get hung up on the way the language sounds instead of the policy ideas behind it. But the substance of it is essentially Project 2025, just with a stupider, more annoying presentation. I mean, you could make a pretty strong argument for voting against this guy just so we don't have to spend the next 4 years listening to him talk. But the worst parts are really what he'd actually do if he got back into the White House. Like, what's the implication here that the US auto industry is gonna magically return to the glory days of the 1950s if they get back to producing internal combustion engine vehicles exclusively? I'm just not convinced that's a realistic plan. In case you're thinking this is just Trump pandering to swing state blue-collar workers, let's go to the next Agenda 47 morsel, which is titled, America must have the #1 lowest cost energy and electricity on Earth. The actual transcript has lots of brilliant stuff about windmills and how China is much more enlightened because of all the coal plants they're building, and some more complaining about electric vehicles, but the front matter is even more disturbing. He promises to exit the Paris Agreement, the horrendously unfair Paris Climate Accords, so he's basically agreeing with Project 2025, just in more absurd language. And you can say Democratic administrations have not been as effective on climate change as you would like them to be. And I'd argue the Biden administration's actually done a lot, and given how hamstrung they are with a divided Congress, but at least they aren't climate deniers. Let's close this section with some final words of wisdom from the former president. This is terrible what's happening to our country. There is nothing to replace our energy at this time, not even close. It's very expensive and it's very weak. It doesn't have the power to power up those big plants that you see. Okay, that was hard to process, so let's dig into a different agenda item that showcases the former guy's uncanny ability to combine sober analysis with heartfelt empathy. Ending the nightmare of the homeless, drug addicts, and dangerously deranged starts with the usual claims about how dystopian our cities are, how they're dangerous, unsanitary places where you have to step over piles of needles and waste. Going to different cities and documenting them is like a full-time job for me, and every city has its problems, but it seems pretty obvious that this whole narrative about how violent and filthy our cities are is mostly just invented stuff to pander to a voting bloc that cowers in fear of urban environments. Anyway, the grand plan here is to herd unhoused people into tent cities and/or put them into quote-unquote mental institutions where they belong. So incarceration in camps for people who are getting priced out because of the housing shortage seems cool. And the transcript sums it all up with a language that I can't even improve on. It's a tough task, a very tough task, what's taken place on the streets, what's taken place when they're taking so much drugs. But the fact is, we're gonna try. The next item is related, and you might get whiplash from how differently the problem of unhoused people is discussed here compared to the previous one, but what's amazing here is that it introduces a whole new diagnosis of the housing shortage that I'm surprised I haven't heard before, since it makes so much sense, which is that our government is spending billions to put up quote-unquote illegal aliens and foreign migrants in expensive luxury hotels. In many states, we're running out of hotel space because the rooms are all booked up with illegal aliens living in a very large way on the American taxpayer's dime. So now you know, the real housing crisis in America is people coming to our country looking for a better life, but they're lounging by the pool at the Four Seasons sipping daiquiris. I don't even need a fact check on that just because it's so obviously true. Let's go to another characteristically understated policy initiative. President Trump announces plan to end crime and restore law and order. This one opens with some extremely measured and very reality-based language regarding conditions in US cities, and then gets into what the actual plan is, which is that in the cities where he's decided that there's been a quote-unquote complete breakdown of law and order, which are probably just the same cities he vilifies all the time because they don't vote for him, he won't hesitate to send in federal assets, including the National Guard, until safety is restored. You know, I was living in Portland, Oregon in 2020 when he sent in the National Guard to shut down protests that were disrupting less than 1% of the land area of the city, and it was not helpful. You might even say it was problematic. The former president thinks this is the solution for blue cities though, and even in our nation's capital, if you don't bring in the National Guard, you get what you get. So if you haven't figured it out by now, pure antipathy for cities is really a bedrock idea in Agenda 47. And it's just a slightly more insane version of the stuff I talked about in my Project 2025 videos, but believe it or not, it gets worse. Before that though, a usual reminder of all the different ways you can help amplify this video's reach if you want to subject random strangers to it. Lots of ways to connect, and something you might be thinking as we go through these transcripts of the former guy's borderline incoherent rants is that this is all framed very negatively, and why don't I talk about the positive things the other side is proposing? Well, I did stream a couple of hours of a variety of folks making the positive case for the Harris-Walz ticket, and I'll link the recording of that stream down in the description. But full disclosure, the minute I started advertising that I was hosting that stream on my channel, I started losing subscribers, which is weird. Anyway, if you actually value me engaging political topics and saying what I think, Patreon is a great way to express that. Let's go to the next policy item. You know, back in the day when I was consulting, like working a real job, one of the axioms was under-promise, over-deliver. Meaning, keep expectations reasonable so that when you actually deliver a great product, it's appreciated and it sets you up for repeat business. Well, it's good to see the former guy also is a big fan of understatement. Trump sets the stage for his proposed quantum leap by lamenting that we just don't do big things anymore the way past generations of Americans did. They transformed American life with the interstate highway system. Magnificent it was. So here's the plan, and to the credit of Agenda 47, I guess, I don't think anything like this appears anywhere in Project 2025. The idea is to take, quote unquote, a fraction of 0.5%, would you believe that, of federally owned land, hold a contest to charter up to 10 new cities, well, not just cities, but freedom cities, and award them to the best proposals for development, and/or whichever tech billionaires donated the most to Trump's campaign. Okay, I made up that last part. I'm sure the whole process would be completely above board. There's more though. There's going to be a special focus on lowering the cost of a new car and lowering the cost to build a single family home, and they will be beautiful homes. Multifamily will still be ugly and expensive, I guess. Those aren't all the ideas Trump has about how to improve cities though. There's a whole beautification campaign, including getting rid of ugly buildings and building towering monuments to our true American heroes. Interpret that however you want, but the closing of this item takes kind of a weird left turn. Very importantly, I will also make sure all of these new places are safe. We love and cherish our police. They will do the job the way they have to. Related, the last deeply thought out policy proposal we're going to look at, ending Biden's war on the suburbs that pushes the American dream further from reach. This one's all about combating the left's Marxist housing agenda, an agenda which apparently includes zoning reforms that allow for anything besides single-family homes to get built. I just love the language in this one. You can't improve on it, so I'm just going to read it verbatim. They are going to destroy your property values by building giant multifamily apartment complexes in the suburbs and even next to your house, and force your community to pay for low-income housing developments right next door. The woke left is waging full-scale war on the suburbs, and their Marxist crusade is coming for your neighborhood, your tax dollars, your public safety, and your home. When I get back into the Oval Office, one of my first acts will be to repeal Joe Biden's radical left attack on the suburban lifestyle. Just as I blew up Barack Obama's leftist housing monstrosity just a few years ago, and I blew it up, the Biden war on the suburbs will be over and it'll never happen again. That whole mess will never ever happen again. We pray for our country. Thank you. You know, all the stuff about the sanctity of single-family zoning is in Project 2025 too, but that's really the sane-washed version. I kind of preferred the Agenda 47 version because it makes the idea sound as insane as it actually is. I personally prefer that my country isn't run by someone who constantly rants about how bad cities are and how the suburban single-family zoned built environment is the ideal. Maybe I'm in the minority on that. I guess we'll find out soon. You might notice that I actually have moved to a new city and I'm gradually getting my studio set up and dialed in. I actually tried to make this look easy, but doing YouTube in a spare bedroom presents a whole ton of challenges in terms of shooting angles, lighting, sound quality, and a bunch of other variables. I'll probably never make a behind the scenes video, but I definitely appreciate when someone else does, especially a creator I really enjoy like Simon Clark. If you don't watch his stuff, Simon does content on earth science and climate change, and long story, but he finally got a dedicated studio instead of shooting in a spare bedroom. This is called Living the Dream, honestly. And he put together a whole behind the scenes documentary that walks through all the choices he made about organizing his new space, going step by step through all the important elements like rigging backdrops, locating light sources, and properly displaying Warhammer miniatures. Grand Designs Creator Edition from Simon Clark is a ton of fun. It is a Nebula Plus video and exclusive to the platform. Simon is a great storyteller, and the video is a perfect example of how the knowledge sharing that happens in the Nebula community allows creators to keep leveling up the quality of what they do. Being part of the community, learning from creators like Simon, and being able to access support for my own production process has been incredibly important for the growth of my channel, and I am extremely proud to be on the Nebula platform. It is, after all, a streaming service that's owned by us, the creators, so when you sign up, you're helping us grow a service that, by its very nature, supports all of us in a long-term structural way, financially, professionally, and creatively. So if you want to support the continued improvement of this channel and also grow its ability to reach more people and make a difference, signing up for Nebula really is the best possible way to do that. And remember, when you sign up, it's not only an investment in our community of creators, it's also an investment in continuing to make the Nebula streaming experience itself better and better. Because yeah, Nebula is kind of like Netflix for people who are a little too into trains, but behind all the nerdery is a pretty big idea: raising the level of the entire platform and growing it into a prestige streaming service. So if you use my custom link down in the description, you're gonna get an amazing value. You can get all the Nebula content for 40% off the regular price when you sign up for an annual subscription, so $36 or $3 a month, and the lifetime offer is still active and probably a better deal than ever. $300, you pay once, and you get Nebula for as long as both you and Nebula exist. As always, whether that's a sound investment or not is a personal matter between you and your preferred actuarial table. Nebula gift cards are another great option, and we are approaching that time of year. Use my code to get the same great discounts, and then you have a new way to share all the Nebula content you enjoy with your family and friends. Even if they already have Nebula accounts, you can gift them a free year at the discounted price using my custom link down in the description. No matter which way you go though, a Nebula membership is a fantastic way to demonstrate your support for a one-of-a-kind creator-owned platform and to fund the continued production of amazing originals, and there's great new stuff hitting the platform all the time. So for all of you who are already Nebula members, a massive thanks from me, although I do feel compelled to say you should probably be watching this video on Nebula where it appears ad-free and without this promo section in it. Just a thought. And that's all I've got. Thanks for joining, and thanks to the patrons. I really do think it's more important than ever for me to be just talking about the things I want to talk about, even if it loses me subscribers. So the direct support really means a lot. I'm coming to the Bay Area and Atlanta in October, so stay tuned for more on-location content coming soon. Keep the great topic suggestions coming. I'll be back with a new episode next week, and I'll see you then.